Isaiah Marshall, 14, had always been quiet. The kind of quiet teachers didn't question, and classmates didn't notice. Until one morning, his math teacher called him to the board with a smirk and a problem no 8th grader should be solving. The class laughed, not because it was funny, but because they didn't expect him to get it right. He solved it anyway. Then the teacher said 6 words that would turn Isaiah's world into a headline. You people don't usually try this hard. The question was who was really being tested that day, Isaiah or the entire system? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Isaiah Marshall had mastered the art of invisibility. At 14, he'd learned that being seen in classrooms like room 217 didn't always mean being heard, and being heard rarely meant being understood. It was easier to blend into the background, let the world believe whatever it wanted about the quiet black boy in the second row with the cracked glasses and silent eyes. But on that chilly October morning with the heating vents hissing louder than the students, Isaiah knew something was different. The moment Mr. Hargrove walked in, blazer sharp, tie too tight, there was a restless buzz among the students. Mondays were always unpredictable. Sometimes it meant a pop quiz, other times just an offhand comment that hung in the air like smoke. But today Mr. Hargrove walked straight to the whiteboard, and without a word, began scribbling a dense math problem, one no one in 8th grade had any business solving. It stretched across the board like a riddle meant to humiliate rather than teach. Logarithms, nested functions, abstract variables. Isaiah vaguely remembered from an old SAT prep book he'd skimmed at the library. The class watched silently, eyes narrowing in confusion, glances exchanged like currency. Mr. Hargrove clicked his marker shut, then turned. All right, class, he said, tone light but eyes sharp. Let's see who wants to take a swing at this. Anyone? No hand. He smiled, scanning the room. Then his eyes landed on Isaiah. You, Mr. Marshall, he said, pointing. Let's see what you've got. A ripple of awkward laughter followed. Not cruel but not kind either. The kind of laughter that didn't know where else to go. Isaiah froze. His pencil stopped moving. He looked up. Me? You, Mr. Hargrove repeated, smiling wider. You've been very observant lately. Let's see if you're more than just quiet. More laughter now, someone whispered. He don't even talk. Isaiah's chair creaked as he stood. His palms were damp. The walk to the board felt like a slow-motion execution. Not because of the problem. The math, at least to Isaiah, wasn't the problem. He'd seen something like it before. Not in class. No, this wasn't grade-level material. But in the back of the old community center, where Mr. Okonkwo used to let the kids borrow books he shouldn't have had, pushing them further than school ever did. He stared at the board, read it twice. His fingers flexed slightly, as if remembering keys on a piano he hadn't touched in years. He picked up the marker and began to solve. At first, the class was quiet. Then murmurs. Wait, he actually… Yo, is he getting it? Lines formed, then functions collapsed. Variables isolated. Isaiah's body moved like muscle memory. Fast but careful. Not showing off, just solving. By the time he reached the bottom of the problem, no one was laughing. He underlined his answer and stepped back. Silence. Mr. Hargrove stared. Then he laughed. Not heartily, but that tight chuckle adults used when they weren't sure how to react. He clapped his hands slowly. Well, I'll be, he said. Looks like we've got ourselves a little math genius. The class stayed silent. Isaiah stood awkwardly to the side, unsure whether to return to his seat. Mr. Hargrove continued. You've been hiding that up your sleeve all this time. Isaiah shrugged. I just saw how to do it. Right, Hargrove said, the smile fading a little. Well, go ahead and take your seat. Isaiah turned back to his desk, ears burning. But as he walked past the front row, a voice muttered just loud enough to be heard. Betty cheated. Then another, probably just memorized it. Isaiah sat down, his hands trembling slightly, under the desk. He stared forward, but his eyes burned. He hadn't asked to be called. He hadn't asked to be mocked, then praised, then doubted. His heart pounded with the weight of too many eyes. The math was the easy part. The real test had already begun. Later that day, between periods, Isaiah heard the whisperings about the video. A student in the back had filmed it. Just 30 seconds of grainy footage, but it was already bouncing around group chats and Snap stories. The caption read, Mr. Hargrove makes black kid do college math. LO. By lunch, Isaiah couldn't walk the halls without hearing it. You famous now? Didn't know you were a math wizard. You trying to transfer to MIT? Each comment felt less like praise and more like performance. No one asked how he knew the math. No one wondered why he never spoke. They just stared, then laughed, or high-fived, or kept walking like nothing happened. At home, his mother noticed he was quieter than usual, which was saying something. She didn't press. She'd learned that Isaiah talked when he was ready. That night, he didn't touch his plate. In his room, he replayed the moment in his head, not the math, the faces. Mr. Hargrove's smirk, the disbelief in his classmates' eyes, the slow clap that wasn't applause but mockery wrapped in sarcasm. The next day, Isaiah walked into school, with his hood up. In math class, Mr. Hargrove didn't call on him. He didn't look his way. But Isaiah noticed something strange. The problem from yesterday was still on the board, untouched. No one had erased it. When the bell rang, Isaiah stayed behind. He walked up to the board again, stared at his own handwriting, then glanced at Mr. Hargrove, who was stacking papers without looking up. "Why'd you ask me to do that yesterday?" Isaiah asked, voice quiet but steady. Mr. Hargrove didn't answer right away. He finally looked up, leaning back in his chair. "Just wanted to see what you could do," he said with a shrug. "Didn't think you'd actually solve it." Isaiah blinked. "So it was a joke?" Mr. Hargrove tilted his head. "You took it seriously. That's what matters, right?" Isaiah didn't respond. He just nodded slowly and walked out. But as he turned down the hallway, he caught something in the reflection of the classroom window. Mr. Hargrove was still staring, not confused. Expectant. Isaiah stopped cold. What kind of teacher sets a trap, pretends it's a challenge, and then waits to see what explodes? And why was Mr. Hargrove smiling, just slightly, like he knew this was only the beginning? What Isaiah noticed on the teacher's smirk wasn't confusion, it was expectation. The classroom was too quiet. That tense, paper-thin silence that follows a moment no one quite understands, but everyone feels in their chest. Isaiah Marshall returned to his desk like a soldier retreating from the front lines. But he wasn't wounded by the problem on the board. It was the aftermath. The laughter that followed had nothing to do with the math. It had been hollow, nervous, tight around the edges. It hadn't been amusement. It had been discomfort. He could feel it in how his classmates looked at him now, as if he'd broken some invisible rule. He'd done something they weren't supposed to see him do. And then came Mr. Hargrove's voice. "Well, Mr. Marshall, I have to admit," he said with a lopsided grin. "You people don't usually try this hard." It hit like a punch without a sound. No gasp. No outcry. Just a stillness. The kind that happens when everyone in the room is waiting to see if anyone else noticed what was just said. Isaiah blinked, but said nothing. The words weren't loud, but they echoed louder than anything else that day. "You people," 3 syllables. Soft. Casual. Coated in syrupy politeness. But Isaiah heard them clearly. Heard the capital letter H, hidden behind hard, the weight of the words sitting like bricks on his shoulders. He looked around. A few students glanced his way, then looked down. One girl chewed her pencil. A boy tapped nervously at his desk. Mr. Hargrove turned away as if the comment had been innocent, almost complimentary. But it wasn't. It never was. Isaiah's fingers curled into the fabric of his jeans. His stomach coiled. He wanted to disappear again, fade back into the silence that protected him. But it was too late. He'd been seen now. Not as brilliant, not as capable, just as a you people. The teacher moved on like nothing happened, started the lesson as if his words hadn't landed like stones. But Isaiah couldn't focus. He could still feel them, floating in the air like chalk dust that wouldn't settle. After class, Isaiah waited until most of the students had gone before collecting his things. He was almost out the door when a voice caught him. "Hey." It was Anna McLean. She usually sat near the back, mostly quiet, always sketching in the margins of her notebooks. Today she looked like she wanted to say more than usual. "That was messed up," she said softly. Isaiah looked at her, unsure if she meant the math problem or the comment. "I heard what he said," she added. "You okay?" Isaiah nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm good." But the lie tasted bitter. Anna hesitated. "Someone recorded it. You know, the whole thing." His head snapped up. "What?" "I think it's already online," she whispered. "On Snap. And TikTok too." Isaiah felt his throat tighten. "Who posted it?" She shrugged. "I think it was Jamal. Or Marcus? I don't know. It's spreading fast. Isaiah didn't say another word. He just walked. Fast. By the time he got to his locker, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Yo, you trending? He unlocked his screen. 2 unread DMs. 1 video link. He tapped it. There he was. Grainy, awkward footage of him standing at the board, marker in hand, solving the problem. Mr. Hargrove's voice echoed faintly over the murmurs. Let's see what you've got. Laughter. Footsteps. Camera shake. Then the voice, clear and sharp, preserved in digital ink. You people don't usually try this hard. Isaiah's heart sank. The caption read, Teacher pulls race card on student after he solves impossible math problem. Views. He scrolled through the comments. Bro is built different. That math was crazy. That teacher's wild. He really said that. Yo, somebody get HR on line 1. Is that even real? No way he said that. It didn't matter if they believed it. It was out now. The humiliation wasn't the math. It was how the moment was being digested. Packaged. Shared. Turned into content. Isaiah had become a meme before he even knew the rules. He shoved his phone into his hoodie and slammed his locker. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pushing in. Eyes felt heavier. Laughter. Louder. He made it through the rest of the day. But barely. The classes blurred together. Teachers spoke but nothing stuck. At lunch he sat alone. That night, at home he said nothing during dinner. His mom asked about his day. He said fine. She asked about his test. He nodded, then went to his room. But he didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, with the light off, scrolling through more videos. The clip had now been shared by 2 local meme pages. Someone had turned the audio into a soundbite. It was already becoming a trend. Kids lip-syncing the line, "You people don't usually try this hard," for laughs, likes, and irony. Isaiah stared at his screen, his reflection faint against the blackness. He didn't feel like a genius. He felt like a joke. At 11:03 p.m. he got another DM. This one from a username he didn't recognize. Truths from 2017. You think this is the first time he said that? Check your email. I sent you something. Isaiah hesitated. Was it a prank? A threat? He opened his school email. 1 new message. Subject proof. Attachment. A zip file labeled hargroverecordings.zip. His pulse quickened. He downloaded the file and clicked. Inside were 6 short audio files. Classroom recordings. Voices faint, but clear enough. And in each, Mr. Hargrove's voice saying something he had no business saying. You're not really cut out for Algebra 1. Maybe something more practical? Let's not try to act like you're at the same level as the others. Okay? You might want to think about vocational school. Nothing wrong with working with your hands. Different students. Different days. Same tone. Same target. Isaiah sat back. The air knocked out of him. The weight of those words, not just to him but to others, was suddenly too much. It wasn't just a joke. It was a pattern. He looked up at the ceiling, then at the time, 11. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He started typing a reply to the anonymous account. Who are you? But before he could hit send, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message. It was a notification. The video clip had been uploaded to YouTube by someone he didn't know. The title, Black Student Outsmarts Racist Teacher Live. Views 32,117. The video clip capturing the moment had already been uploaded, without Isaiah's knowledge. By morning, Isaiah's world was no longer private. His name, once just another in the roster of quiet kids, was now an algorithm's obsession. Notifications exploded across his cracked phone screen like fireworks he hadn't lit. His inbox blinked with strangers' messages. His face plastered across timelines he'd never followed. The video, the one titled Black Student Outsmarts Racist Teacher Live, had crossed 100,000 views before sunrise. The thumbnail showed him mid-step, looking nervous, holding the marker, his mouth half open, eyes on the board, a freeze frame that looked more like fear than focus. But the caption beneath it told a different story. When the teacher jokes, and the student claps back with genius. That wasn't what happened. Not even close. Isaiah scrolled through the comments, heart sinking with every line. Bro cooked him in front of everyone. Why can't all kids be like this? Teacher wasn't even being racist. People reach too much. Kid's a hero. Kid's an attention seeker. The internet had already chosen sides. And Isaiah wasn't in control of either. In less than 24 hours, his story wasn't his anymore. It belonged to the hashtags, to the threads, to the outrage and the amusement, both equally loud. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the numbers. 238K views. Then 250K. The count refreshed faster than he could blink. His chest felt tight, like something invisible was closing in. He turned the phone face down. Downstairs, his mother, Lorraine Marshall, was pouring coffee, humming quietly to herself, a defense mechanism against stress. She worked double shifts at the clinic and had learned long ago that humming made exhaustion seem softer. "Morning, baby," she said as he walked in, voice tender, though her eyes immediately caught the tiredness in his. "Rough night?" Isaiah hesitated. "Kinda." She slid him a plate of toast. "Math test again?" He opened his mouth to say no, but his phone buzzed again on the counter. Her eyes flicked to it. The notification banner was visible for just long enough. "IU watch now. Viral video teacher's racist comment sparks debate in Georgia middle school." Her hum stopped. "Isaiah," she said slowly. "What is that?" He froze. "It's nothing, Mom. Just Isaiah." Her tone sharpened. She rarely raised her voice, but she didn't need to. She had the kind of authority that came from years of fighting small, invisible battles no one gave awards for. "Let me see it," she said. He handed her the phone. Lorraine scrolled silently, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to quiet fury. The room seemed smaller. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound between them. "He said this to you?" she asked, her voice low. Isaiah nodded. It was supposed to be a joke. Her hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down. "A joke." He looked down. "Everyone's sharing it. It's already everywhere." She pressed her lips together. "Has the school called you?" He shook his head. "They will." By noon they did. The principal's voice on the other end was dry, rehearsed. Lorraine listened without interrupting. "Yes, we're aware of the situation. Yes, we're investigating internally. No, we don't encourage recording in classrooms. Yes, we're deeply sorry this has affected your family." It was the kind of apology that said everything and nothing at the same time. After hanging up, she stood in silence for a long moment, before whispering, "They're already trying to bury it." Isaiah looked up from the couch. "What do you mean?" "They're saying it's not about race," she said flatly, "that it was a misunderstanding. They want this to fade before the district office calls." He frowned, but he said it. Everyone heard it. "Doesn't matter," she said bitterly. "If it's not convenient for them, it never happened." Isaiah turned back to his phone. The story had now spread beyond Georgia. National education accounts were sharing it. Commentators were dissecting it. TV anchors had started using words like controversial, unclear context, and viral moment. The truth was being watered down with every repost. The racism, the quiet humiliation was being replaced with clickbait headlines. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was content. At school, whispers replaced conversation. Every hallway felt colder, narrower. The same kids who'd laughed 2 days ago now avoided looking at him, not out of guilt, but fear of being seen taking sides. Some teachers smiled too much. Others pretended he didn't exist. When Isaiah entered room 217, Mr. Hargrove looked up briefly, then continued writing on the board. His voice, normally loud and commanding, sounded thinner than usual. "All right, class, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover today." The tension was suffocating. Every sentence sounded like an apology he didn't know how to give. Halfway through class, someone's phone buzzed. A faint chuckle rippled through the back row. Mr. Hargrove glanced up sharply. "Put it away." The student muttered something under his breath. The teacher didn't catch it, but Isaiah did. "Guess he's scared to say anything now," the kid whispered. Isaiah kept his eyes on his desk, jaw tight. After class, Mr. Hargrove called out, "Isaiah, a moment, please." Isaiah stopped at the door. "I just wanted to say." The teacher hesitated, his usual authority replaced with something almost human, almost nervous. "I didn't mean for that comment to come across the way it did." Isaiah turned. "The way it did or the way you said it?" Mr. Hargrove blinked. You said it," Isaiah continued quietly, steady now. "You didn't slip. You meant it. You just didn't think anyone would notice." The teacher's eyes hardened, just for a second. The mask slipping. "Be careful what you imply, son." Isaiah's stomach twisted. Son. Another word that stung more than it soothed. He walked out without replying. That night, the video crossed 500,000 views. Reporters had begun reaching out. One news headline read, "Classroom genius embarrasses teacher during math lesson." Was it racism or overreaction? The debate had begun. Lorraine watched one of the news segments at the kitchen table, her laptop open, her face tight with disbelief. The anchors joked lightly before moving on to sports. No outrage, no empathy, just transition music. She muttered to herself, "They always turn pain into entertainment." Then she saw it. One comment under the video that stopped her breathing mid-sentence. It wasn't long, just 2 words. "He remembers." At first she thought it was random. Spam. But then she saw the username JEllison94. Her hand trembled, because she knew that name.
Jamal Ellison.
He was the boy who'd vanished from the district 2 years ago after an incident involving the same teacher. An incident no one ever talked about again. Lorraine's vision blurred for a moment, as she stared at the screen. The realization hit like a silent storm. This wasn't just her son's story. It was history repeating itself. She slowly turned toward Isaiah's room. "Isaiah," she called softly. "Come here, baby." He appeared at the door, cautious. "Yeah." She pointed at the comment on her laptop. His brow furrowed. "Who's that?" Lorraine's voice shook. "Someone we thought we'd never hear from again." A single comment under the video made Isaiah's mother stop breathing. 2 days after the video crossed 1 million views, the Fulton County School Board released an official statement. It was 3 paragraphs long, filled with soft language, and no names. "We are aware of a recent classroom incident involving a teacher and student at Jefferson Middle School. The district is reviewing the matter internally and remains committed to fostering a safe, respectful learning environment for all students. At this time, we believe the situation stemmed from a misunderstanding of humor and context, rather than intentional harm. We ask for patience while we assess all facts. Out of respect for the privacy of the individuals involved, no further comments will be made at this time." Lorraine Marshall read it 3 times, her eyes growing sharper with each pass. Isaiah read it once, then pushed his phone away like it was contaminated. "A misunderstanding," Lorraine repeated, her voice flat. "They called it a misunderstanding." Isaiah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ache in his stomach did the talking. The damage wasn't just emotional anymore. It was systemic. The words were chosen with precision, not to inform but to protect. The district had buried the racism beneath corporate neutrality. Isaiah was never named. Mr. Hargrove wasn't either. It was as if the people hurt didn't exist. Only the system's image. Lorraine stood up from the couch and paced the room. "They're not protecting him," she muttered. "They're protecting themselves." She picked up the phone and dialed. Not the school, not the district. The number belonged to Vanessa Reed, a community organizer and longtime education activist who'd once led a campaign against discriminatory disciplinary practices in nearby Cobb County. "I need help," Lorraine said when Vanessa answered. "Tell me everything," Vanessa replied without hesitation. That evening, Vanessa came to the house. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, with a presence that calmed rooms even when she came to shake them. She listened to Isaiah recount everything, from the math problem to the comment, the viral video, the silence at school, and the veiled threats in Mr. Hargrove's apology. Then Lorraine showed her the email they received that morning from the principal. It was titled "Support for Isaiah," but read more like a liability notice. "We're here if Isaiah needs someone to talk to. In the meantime, we'd appreciate your family refraining from public commentary while the matter is under review." Vanessa read it once, then looked up. "That's not support. It's a muzzle." She tapped her fingers against her knee. "I've seen this before," she said. "First they minimize, then they wait for the news cycle to move on. If that doesn't work, they look for a reason to discredit the student." Lorraine's jaw tightened. "Over my dead body." Vanessa nodded. "Then we go public. The right way." The next morning, Isaiah sat in front of a small camera crew, inside a quiet studio space, run by a local independent media group called Youth Uprising News, a platform that didn't chase views, but told unfiltered stories from inside Black communities. No hair lights, no makeup, just a folding chair, a mic, and his voice. He spoke carefully, not angrily, but clearly. "I didn't ask to go viral. I didn't even ask to go to the board. I was just trying to make it through another day without being noticed." He paused. "But when I got that problem right, something changed. Not just in the class. In him, Mr. Hargrove. It's like he couldn't believe someone like me could do that. So he had to bring me back down. With words. With that word, you people." The interviewer leaned forward gently. What do you want from the school district now? Isaiah didn't hesitate. I want them to stop hiding behind statements and own what happened. And I want to know how many other kids had to go through this in silence. The video went live that night. It was raw. It was honest. And it went viral all over again. But this time for the right reasons. Hashtags shifted from Cine Teacher Moment to Justice for Isaiah and Expose Hargrove. More voices joined the conversation. Parents, former students, even a few quiet staffers posting anonymously. One anonymous post read, "This is not Mr. Hargrove's first time making racially insensitive remarks. We reported it. Nothing changed." Another said, "My son came home crying after Mr. Hargrove joked that he'd probably be great at street math. We didn't know where to take it." The district remained silent until the leak. 3 days after Isaiah's interview aired, an investigative journalist named Darius Langston from the Atlanta Mirror posted a bombshell on Twitter, now X. Breaking. Internal complaint reports against Jefferson Middle School teacher Richard Hargrove show a pattern of racially inappropriate behavior dating back 7 years. Records were never escalated to district level. Attached were redacted documents. 6 formal complaints filed by parents, 1 from a former staff member. Each time, the outcome was the same. Handled at school level, no further action, resolved internally. Darius confirmed that the documents had come from a current school employee who requested anonymity for fear of retaliation. Screenshots of emails were included, principals brushing off concerns, calling parents overly sensitive, warning staff not to make waves. The documents went live at 7:12 p.m. By 8:30, Bayer Hargrove was trending nationally. News outlets that had previously shrugged off the story now scrambled for interviews. But Jefferson Middle School stayed quiet until their front doors were surrounded the next morning by over 200 parents, students, and protesters, many holding signs with phrases like, "Silence is complicity. My child is not your punchline. Accountability now." Isaiah stood near the back with Vanessa and his mother. He didn't need to speak. His silence was louder than any microphone. Local news reporters interviewed the crowd. One woman, whose daughter had also been in Hargrove's class, said, "This district ignored us for years. It took one kid going viral for them to even blink." Another added, "If you're a black student in this system, they teach you real early what they expect from you and what they don't." Lorraine held Isaiah's hand tighter than usual. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Isaiah didn't reply. He was watching the school doors, wondering if Mr. Hargrove was watching them back. Inside, Mr. Hargrove sat behind a closed office door. The principal had called an emergency meeting with district lawyers, who were already crafting language for a potential resignation package. Hargrove stared at the screen. On it was Isaiah's face, not from the viral video but from the Youth Uprising interview. He clicked the audio. "And I want to know how many other kids had to go through this in silence." A flicker of something crossed his expression, not remorse but recognition. Because he knew. That night, as the protest outside gained momentum, Darius Langston received another anonymous tip in his encrypted inbox. It contained a single PDF file. No message, no explanation. The file was titled, "Staff Complaints Hargrove," full unredacted. Inside were more than just complaints. There were emails, staff meeting notes, and a student testimony from 3 years ago, detailing eerily similar language. A young black girl, who had dropped out of the magnet program after Hargrove told her she wasn't cut out for gifted math. That file had never been logged in any district record. The final page contained a note written in bold red font. "He's been protected long enough. Let the truth speak." Someone from inside the school leaked the teacher's past complaints file to a journalist. To the school board, Mr. Hargrove had always been a model educator. His record, at least the public version, reflected glowing evaluations, leadership and curriculum development, and exceptional classroom management. He'd even won a teaching award 5 years ago for building engagement in underperforming communities. But as Darius Langston read deeper into the leaked files, the truth unspooled like hidden rot behind polished walls. The documents told a different story. 7 complaints, all filed over the last decade, all from black students or their parents, all marked handled internally, with no formal action taken. The wording was subtle, always careful, never explicitly racist, but always laced with something just beneath the surface. Student alleges teacher made dismissive comments about their performance. Parent concerned about teacher minimizing students' participation. Incident involved teacher redirecting black student to lower track math. Reported use of phrase "not everyone is built for advanced math." Each complaint had been quietly closed. The principal's handwritten notes were often vague. Spoke to staff. Matter resolved. Student no longer in class. And one that stood out like a knife. No longer a concern. Student transferred schools. The phrase read like a celebration, as if removing the child had solved the problem. Darius sat back from his screen, staring at the list. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a slow, systemic unraveling of futures under the camouflage of professional decorum. He picked up the phone and called Lorraine Marshall. "Mrs. Marshall," he said, his voice tense. "I've seen the files. There's more than just your son." Her breath caught. "How many?" "At least 7 that we know of." "I think it's more." Lorraine's voice dropped. "They let him keep going. They erased the footprints every time," Darius said. "And the kids who disappeared? They weren't failing. They were being pushed out." Lorraine went quiet. Then, a steeliness returned to her voice. "We need to find them." That evening, Vanessa Reed sent out a call across the county's parent networks, PTA groups, activist circles, even private Facebook forums for black mothers in education. The message was simple. If your child had Mr. Hargrove and something felt wrong, now is the time to speak. Within hours, inboxes lit up, first a few, then a dozen, then more. Most shared the same story. Not overt abuse, but constant microcuts, being told to tone it down, having their confidence questioned, being moved to lower-level classes, despite high grades, having requests for tutoring brushed off with patronizing smiles. And then one message came in that changed everything. The subject line read, "My daughter was one of them. I have proof." The girl's name was Talia Breland. She had been in Hargrove's class 3 years prior, a straight-A student in the magnet math track, the only black girl in the room. Her mother, Deneen Breland, had pulled her from Jefferson Middle, after what she described as months of coded sabotage. Deneen met with Vanessa and Darius the next day. She brought a folder. Inside were emails, printed screenshots, notes from parent-teacher meetings, and one sheet that hadn't aged well. A formal letter from Hargrove, recommending Talia be re-evaluated for academic mismatch, despite her test scores being in the top 10% of the class. "He told me she asked too many questions," Deneen said, her voice calm but coiled. That she was disruptive with her curiosity, that her style of learning didn't mesh with his structure. And by that, Darius said slowly, he meant she didn't stay quiet. Exactly. Vanessa flipped through the pages. One screenshot stood out, an internal email from Hargrove to the guidance counselor. "Talia's constant questioning is slowing down the rest of the class. We need to consider alternate placement." Deneen leaned forward. "She cried every night, thought she was dumb, lost her confidence. I knew something was wrong, but every time I tried to raise it, they said she just wasn't fitting in." "Where is she now?" Vanessa asked. "Transferring her saved her," Deneen said. "She's in high school now, doing better, but she still gets quiet in math." There was a pause. Then Deneen pulled out one last printed sheet. A screenshot from Talia's old school email. The date was from 3 years ago. The message? A note from Hargrove, sent after her mother complained to the district. Just a reminder that not everyone's destined for the Ivy League. It's okay to be average. Darius stared at it. There it was. Plain, quiet, dismissive. Not a slur, not a threat, but a seed planted in a young black girl's mind, and then forgotten by everyone but her. The story was growing teeth. Darius published a second exposé, Jefferson Middle's pattern of pushing out black excellence. It detailed Talia's experience, the erased complaints, and the systemic shielding of Mr. Hargrove by school leadership. Within hours, the story hit state-level outlets. The district was now under pressure not just from parents but from state education authorities. Jefferson Middle issued a follow-up statement. This time, it named Hargrove. Effective immediately, Mr. Richard Hargrove has been placed on administrative leave pending further review. The district takes all claims of bias seriously and is cooperating with external investigators. It was a sentence meant to calm the storm, but it only fueled the fire. Because now, others were stepping forward. Students who had long believed what happened to them would never matter. Isaiah scrolled through his phone that night, watching the waves roll in. The stories. The reposts. The truth. And then he saw it. A message request from someone he didn't recognize. The profile name was Marcus. He tapped it open. The first message read, "It happened to me too. Ninth grade. He told me I'd never pass AP Math without a miracle. I transferred schools a month later." Then a second message came in. "I have screenshots. You're not alone." Isaiah's hands trembled. He clicked the attachment. It was a saved copy of an old classroom group chat from 3 years ago. Students had been joking about teachers, making memes. But one post stuck out. It was from Marcus. "Hargrove just told me not to dream too big. Lol. Said I should aim for something more realistic for my background." What does that mean? Isaiah stared at it, his breath shallow. Because Marcus had been erased too. And now, like so many others, he was finally ready to be seen. One student who had transferred schools because of Hargrove stepped forward with screenshots. The headlines were finally saying his name, but Isaiah Marshall had been fighting this fight long before cameras cared, long before hashtags, before public statements, before strangers debated his story in comment sections. He'd been living it, quietly. Every school year, every classroom, every time he raised his hand and watched it float in the air, unanswered. Before Mr. Hargrove, there had been others. A 6th grade science teacher, who always called on the white kids first, even when Isaiah had the answer written on his desk before anyone else. A substitute in 5th grade, who once asked him if he even belonged in the honors class. A gym coach who joked that Isaiah didn't need math, so long as he could dunk. It had never been loud racism. It was subtler, slippery, enough to make you question your own perception. When Isaiah was 9, he tested in the 96th percentile for math. His mother remembered the score vividly. She brought it to the school's attention, asked if he could be placed in accelerated tracks. The counselor smiled politely and told her it was probably a fluke, and that Isaiah shouldn't be pushed too hard too fast. That same year, Isaiah's white friend with an 89 percentile score got into the advanced section. At first, Isaiah hadn't understood. He thought maybe he'd done something wrong. Maybe they were right. But over time, the pattern grew clearer. He was either invisible or doubted. If he stayed quiet, they called him disengaged. If he spoke up, they said he was disruptive. When he answered quickly, it was luck. If he struggled once, it was confirmation. It wasn't just teachers. Other students made comments without realizing what they meant, or maybe realizing it too well. "Wow, you're actually smart. I thought you were more into sports. Bet you're getting an athletic scholarship, right?" He'd learned to laugh those off. It was easier than explaining why they hurt. The thing about racism in school was that it didn't always shout. It whispered. It smiled. It wrapped itself in compliments that didn't feel right. And Isaiah had carried those wounds for years, wounds that never bled, but never fully closed. Now, with the world watching, people were acting like this all started with one math problem. But that wasn't the beginning. It was just the flashpoint. Lorraine knew it too. Watching her son now, seeing him caught in the whirlwind of attention and digital fame, she grieved what it took to get here. She remembered parent-teacher conferences where she was told Isaiah needed to speak up more, while he privately cried about never being chosen. She remembered the time she bought him a new calculator with money she didn't have, only for him to be accused of cheating because he solved problems too fast. She remembered the exhaustion of having to be calm, composed, and polite every time she advocated for him, knowing that if she showed even a flicker of anger, she'd be labeled difficult. And now here they were, finally seen, but still not safe. One afternoon, as Isaiah sat at the kitchen table doing homework, or pretending to, Lorraine's phone buzzed. She looked down, her brows furrowed. "It's a reporter," she said, "from Daybreak Atlanta. Wants to speak with you." Isaiah looked up. "Me? They want you on their morning segment. Live interview. Just 10 minutes, they said. About your experience." Isaiah's fingers tensed. "I don't know." "You don't have to," Lorraine said gently. "It's your choice." He nodded, but his eyes were already distant. He wasn't afraid of talking. He was afraid of how they'd spin it. The way his story was being shaped into something inspirational, when in truth it had been years of quiet erosion. He thought about Talia, about Marcus, about all the others who didn't go viral. What if speaking up made it worse? He spent the night thinking about it. The next morning, he made his decision. "I'll do it," he told his mother at breakfast. "But only if I can say everything." Lorraine nodded. "You say what you need. I'll be there." She emailed the reporter back, confirmed the slot. Everything moved quickly after that. The station arranged transportation. The producer sent over topics. They prepped him for the lighting, the chair, how to look into the camera. But none of that was what stopped him cold. What stopped him was what happened that afternoon, when he was pulled from algebra class by the assistant principal. He was taken to a small office with a poster of eagles on the wall, and a clock that ticked too loudly. The AP, Mr. Collier, closed the door behind them, and sat across from Isaiah. "I hear you're doing a TV interview," he said casually. Isaiah said nothing. "That's quite the step," Collier continued. "Just wanted to make sure you understand the school's position." Isaiah frowned. "What position?" "Well, when a student speaks publicly about internal school matters, especially during an ongoing investigation, it can be seen as disruptive." Isaiah narrowed his eyes. "Disruptive? We just want to keep things calm," Collier said, still smiling. "Maintain the integrity of the process." Isaiah felt the familiar chill in his chest, the way white adults in power used soft words to deliver hard truths. "So what happens if I go on?" Collier paused. "I'm not saying there will be consequences, but if the school determines that your comments reflect poorly on our environment, it could be seen as conduct detrimental to the community." Isaiah stared at him. "You're saying I could get suspended?" Collier raised both hands. "I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking you to think carefully, for your future." Isaiah stood up. "My future's not your concern." He left the office with his heart pounding. Back in the hallway, he passed by a janitor wheeling a cart. She gave him a quiet nod, like she'd heard it all through the walls. And maybe she had. That night, Isaiah sat in the living room with his mother and told her everything. "They're threatening suspension," he said. "If I go on TV." Lorraine didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, with her voice calm but fierce, "Then we go anyway." Isaiah looked up. "Are you sure?" "I am now," she said. "If they're scared of what you might say, that means they know it's the truth." Isaiah nodded slowly. He wasn't just carrying his own voice anymore. He was carrying all the ones they'd tried to silence. A journalist wanted Isaiah to speak on live TV, but the school threatened suspension if he did. The day Isaiah appeared on Daybreak Atlanta, the sun hadn't even fully risen, but a storm had already begun to swell. He wore a black zip-up hoodie, unbranded, plain. No script, no prep cards, just a calm steadiness in his voice as he faced the host. His posture was still, but every word was laced with quiet resistance. "I was told I'd be punished for speaking," he said. "But silence has already punished too many kids like me." The anchor, caught off guard, blinked. "Punished by the school?" Isaiah didn't nod. He didn't need to. He just looked directly into the camera and said, "You can't fix what you refuse to admit is broken." That soundbite traveled fast. By noon, the clip had crossed 1.2 million views online, and by 4:00 p.m., it was airing on multiple regional stations. Twitter reposts turned into quote threads. Instagram stories lit up with the word "silenced" in all caps. But something else happened that the district hadn't expected. The kids paid attention. The walkout started with 5 students, then 20. By lunch, nearly half the student body was standing outside the front of Jefferson Middle, arms crossed, backs straight, faces solemn. They didn't chant. They didn't scream. They stood in complete silence, holding handmade signs that read, "We heard him. If he's disruptive, so are we. We are not your misunderstanding." Inside, the administrative office scrambled. Teachers peeked through blinds. The principal paced his office, phone in hand, whispering to district officials. Outside, Isaiah stood at the center of the crowd, his hood pulled low, his breath visible in the autumn chill. Lorraine was there too, on the sidewalk with other parents, some of them holding coffee cups, some gripping bullhorns, all of them alert and locked in. Media vans pulled up by the dozen. The district had tried to contain the spark. Instead, it ignited a fire. By late afternoon, news helicopters hovered above the school. Reporters asked for interviews, but the students didn't speak. They stood still. It was Isaiah's idea. "They already talk over us," he'd said. "Let's show them what being silenced looks like." When the cameras rolled, they didn't capture sound bites. They captured resistance in its rawest form. Black, brown, white. Students of every kind, arms linked. Teachers from other schools began emailing their support anonymously. Some brought bottled water to the sidewalk. Others sent copies of Isaiah's interview to their students. One teacher from a neighboring school posted, "He's doing more for education than half our board." The district had no response. That night, The superintendent released a follow-up statement, one that tried to sound decisive, but only deepened the fury. We respect the right of our students to express themselves, but disruptions to the academic process must be handled within the scope of our conduct policies. We encourage dialogue, not disorder. The phrase conduct policies trended for the next 12 hours, with one viral tweet mocking, translation, "We like your passion, just not when it threatens our power." The next day, something even more unexpected happened. Jefferson High School, across the city, held its own silent protest in solidarity. Then an elementary school down the block did the same. Isaiah watched the news with his mouth slightly open. Lorraine sat beside him, rubbing his shoulder with one hand, disbelief etched into her face. "This is bigger than me," he whispered. "Yes," Lorraine said softly. "And it always was." By the end of the week, a citywide demonstration was planned. October 18th, Centennial Park, noon. They called it the Walk for the Silenced. It wasn't just about Isaiah anymore. It was for every child pushed aside, talked down to, discouraged quietly, until they stopped believing in themselves. Isaiah didn't want to speak at the rally. At first, "I'm not a leader," he told Vanessa. Vanessa smiled. "You're not trying to lead, you're trying to live. That's why they're listening." So he agreed. He wrote his speech in the early hours of the morning, with a notebook and a pencil, staring at a blank page until the words came. And when they did, they poured out like water behind a broken dam. The rally drew over 3,000 people. Parents, students, teachers, activists, people who had never met Isaiah, but who'd lived some version of his truth. The park overflowed with signs. Black brains matter. Education without bias.
Disrupt the dismissal.
When Isaiah stepped up to the small podium, his hands shook slightly, but his voice didn't. "I was told I didn't belong in advanced math," he began. "I was told quietly that I should aim lower. Speak less, stay grateful." He paused. "I solved one problem on a board, and it showed me the real problem was never the math. It was that they didn't expect someone who looked like me to solve it." The crowd roared. Later that evening, as Isaiah sat in the back seat of his mother's car, the cheers still echoing in his ears, he felt something shift. Not closure, not victory, but clarity. A door had opened, not just for him, for everyone watching. And that terrified the people who had kept those doors closed for decades. The next morning, Isaiah arrived at school with a new energy. There were no threats this time, no assistant principal waiting in a quiet office. Just stares, some admiring, some unsure. He sat in first period, and opened his notebook, took notes, raised his hand. No one dared ignore it now. But the story wasn't done. As he left fourth period, weaving through the now familiar stares and quiet whispers, a hand tapped his shoulder. He turned. It was a student he didn't recognize. A girl, maybe a sophomore. Dark hoodie, eyes down. She handed him a small white envelope. He stared at it. "What's this?" She shrugged. "Just passing it along. Said you'd know what it meant." Before he could ask who, she was gone, swallowed into the hallway traffic. Isaiah looked down. The envelope had no name, just the school's official emblem bossed in the corner. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Plain. Just one sentence. "You're being watched." His heart skipped. He read it again. There was no signature, no logo, no timestamp. Just those three words. Cold, clinical, and chillingly deliberate. He folded it once, slid it into his pocket, and looked up. Across the hallway, standing by the drinking fountain, was a man in a gray suit. Not a teacher, not a student, staring. Then just as quickly he turned and disappeared down the hallway. During the protest, someone handed Isaiah a letter with the school's emblem, and a warning. "You're being watched." The moment the national anchor framed Isaiah Marshall's story as a classroom challenge that exposed something far bigger, the quiet middle school student became something he never asked to be: a symbol. Overnight his name filled news feeds, his face flickered from morning shows to afternoon cable panels, and his hoodie became the unspoken uniform of a movement he hadn't planned. In the newsroom, voices raced. "This is about one teacher's comment," one producer argued, "but it's really about every student who was told they weren't enough." A correspondent on the ground in Atlanta noted how social media posts shifted from "kid beats teacher at math" to "black teenager versus systemic bias." Civil rights organizations issued statements. The NAACP called for an independent investigation. The American Civil Liberties Union promised legal review. A hashtag campaign, not just one problem, spread like wildfire across platforms. Isaiah's phone buzzed constantly. Alerts from major outlets, DMs from journalists, screenshots of posts that used his image as background for commentary about bias. His mother, Lorraine Marshall, sat beside him in their living room one evening, trying to keep calm while her son's world cracked open. "You okay?" she asked quietly. His answer was silent, just a stiff nod. Inside him, the weight grew heavier each minute. At school, it wasn't easier. The spotlight had changed the air. Students whispered. Teachers stared. The principal tried to deliver measured toleration. But the accusations and counter-accusations outside the building echoed down the hallways. Surveillance crews hovered by the front doors. Helicopter blades flashed overhead midday. Local news trucks were there again. Isaiah walked through the halls like someone carrying a billboard on his chest that read "Speak for them." In a late-night meeting, activists and community leaders gathered at the community center. Vanessa Reed, the organizer, stood in front of a whiteboard full of strategies, media briefings, march coordination, legal support, parent workshops. Isaiah sat off to the side, exhausted, someone's shoulder under his head. Someone handed him a bottled water. He took a sip, but he couldn't swallow. The campaign had grown bigger than himself. He didn't want to lead it. He wanted it to end. He wanted to go back to being an invisible kid who just solved a problem on the board. The tension mounted when a major network ran a segment titled "When a Joke Becomes a Case Study, School Systems Under Siege." Scenes cut between Isaiah's classroom footage, protests in front of the school, interviews with parents whose children claimed similar treatment, and policy analysts explaining how microaggressions in classrooms are part of a larger educational equity crisis. Comments poured in. Finally, someone is paying attention. What about the other kids who didn't go viral? Is every teacher now under suspicion? This poor kid, too much too soon. That last one haunted Isaiah. He realized the narrative was pulling him tight at both ends. As a victim and as a symbol, he felt torn between wanting justice and wanting to run. One evening, as he lay in bed with his phone screen illuminating his face, a direct message popped up. "Add education leaks. We have internal files. Want you to see them." His heart clenched. He told himself, just another message. But then came an attachment, a zipped folder. He ignored it at first. Then curiosity overcame caution. He opened it. Inside, internal memos from the district office about teacher performance and student relations. Some critiqued the language used by Mr. Hargrove. Others mentioned parent-alumni concerns about the narrative risks of strong academic performance by minority students. Isaiah sat up. His phone screen reflected the words. He closed the folder quickly. What should he do? Tell his mother? His lawyer? His organizer? He didn't know, because now even his thoughts were evidence in a war he never volunteered for. At home, Lorraine watched the news coverage in stunned silence. She felt proud and terrified in the same breath. Proud of her son, but terrified of what exposure meant. When she looked at Isaiah, she saw youth drained by weight. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "He's not alone," she said softly. "And neither are you." Isaiah exhaled shallowly. "I know, but it doesn't feel like that." The next day at school, something unexpected happened. The lunchtime broadcast went to a panel of students invited to speak. One black student, Jasmine Peterson, stood up. She told her story, how in 6th grade her teacher had told her she should stick to subjects where you're comfortable. Jasmine's voice was steady. The broadcast picked it up. A reporter asked her, "Do you see this as connected to Isaiah's case?" She nodded. "Yes. It's bigger than one board problem." The segment ended with Jasmine's closing line. "They didn't challenge us because they didn't think we were challenge-worthy." The clip lingered in Isaiah's mind long after the bell rang. He realized now the math problem had nothing to do with numbers. It had to do with expectation. Just when he thought the pressure couldn't heighten further, a new email arrived in his inbox. From his school account. Subject, Security Advisory. System Notice. He clicked. The email said that external parties had contacted the school about possible data breach involving student files. The district advised students not to access unknown links. It felt standard, but Isaiah knew it wasn't. He could feel the code in the text, a warning whispered in protocol. He leaned back in his chair and shut his laptop. Outside, the city lights wavered beyond his window. He felt watched. He felt vulnerable. He felt the spotlight, but also the dark behind it. And there was something worse. The files he'd opened the night before were just the beginning. An anonymous hacker group leaked internal emails between Hargrove and the principal. The leak wasn't just explosive, it was radioactive. 3 hours after Isaiah received the anonymous message, the files were everywhere. Redacted PDFs, metadata dumps, blurred screenshots now sharpened and circulating with viral speed. Social media accounts tied to an anonymous hacker group, named Glasskey, took credit claiming they couldn't sit silent while corruption walked halls children were punished in. The files contained internal emails between Jefferson Middle's staff, but more specifically, direct threads between Mr. Hargrove and Principal Suzanne Minter, spanning the past 4 years. What they revealed was not a case of one teacher's isolated comments. It was a culture, a carefully protected loop of complicity. One thread, from just 7 months earlier, had a subject line, Student Conduct Watch List, Internal Eyes Only. The email outlined a list of students to monitor for classroom disruptions, 8 names, 6 of which were black boys. Next to Isaiah's name, this was long before the math incident, Hargrove had typed, quiet but subversive. Keep an eye. High risk for escalation, if provoked. Lorraine read it aloud in their living room, and nearly dropped the laptop. High risk for escalation? She repeated. What does that even mean? Isaiah just stared at the screen, numb. He didn't even remember doing anything that semester that would raise flags. He remembered only staying quiet, raising his hand, doing his work. Apparently, even that was dangerous when you weren't supposed to outperform expectations. The emails got worse. A group thread among faculty, titled Culture Moments in the Classroom, initially appeared harmless. Teachers sharing odd things, students said, moments that made them laugh. But one message from Hargrove stuck out. Today's gem told a student he wasn't cut out for AP, said he'd probably be amazing in P. He thought I was serious. Bless him. No names were mentioned, but the subtext screamed through. The date matched the week Isaiah had asked about test placement. Other staff chimed in with emojis and low responses. One even replied, "Can't make this stuff up. Athletic scholarships save lives." That one had come from another math teacher, a man Isaiah had never even met. The jokes were casual, but the pattern was surgical. Every comment dismissed black students' intelligence, either passively or through humor. The paper trail wasn't just thin, it was weaponized invisibility. Racism dressed as banter, bias as bureaucracy. Vanessa Reed, holding a printout of the emails during an emergency community meeting, paced like a prosecutor in front of the crowd. They didn't just ignore complaints, she said. They engineered a system where those complaints were never seen as credible in the first place. Parents sat stunned, mouths open. Some whispered names to each other. Others pulled out their phones and scrolled to confirm the stories they already suspected. Isaiah sat quietly in the corner, the only kid in the room, watching grown-ups piece together something he had felt for years, but couldn't explain. His silence was now a kind of fuel. The district's official response came late the next day. A statement from the superintendent's office admitted the email leak was deeply troubling and promised a full internal review of communication protocols. It didn't mention Hargrove, or Principal Minter, or the students named in the conduct watch list. But behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Civil rights attorneys drafted letters. An education equity task force began preparing subpoenas. Local lawmakers, some facing re-election, called for transparency. What started as a classroom comment had become a systemic scandal. The next night, a new email surfaced in the second batch of leaks. It was dated October 14th, just 4 days before Isaiah solved the problem on the board. Subject: preemptive discipline strategy, high-profile students. In it, Principal Minter wrote to 3 department heads. With ongoing media attention, we must be cautious. Certain students, particularly those now considered at risk for publicity, should be monitored with subtle intervention. Avoid escalation unless legally required. Vanessa read the line twice before slamming her hand on the table. They were strategizing containment, not accountability. Containment. The room went silent. That same night, Isaiah received another anonymous email. No sender address, just a subject. Read this. Inside was a single forwarded message from 2 years ago. The email was from Hargrove, and addressed to Principal Minter. It read, "Per our discussion today, incident with JE resolved quietly. No need for documentation. Parent agreed to withdraw student. Avoid media. Recommend shredding draft complaint to prevent duplication error." The date was from 2 years prior. JE. Isaiah's stomach dropped. His mother stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Jamal Ellison, she whispered. It has to be. Jamal, the boy who had vanished from the school with no warning, no goodbye, just silent. Lorraine's eyes filled. They didn't forget him, she said. They erased him. The sentence haunted them both. Recommend shredding draft complaint to prevent duplication error. There had never been a public record of Jamal's complaint. No one even knew there had been an incident. But this email proved it. They'd buried him long before Isaiah ever picked up the marker at the board. One of the emails referenced a disturbing incident from 2 years ago, never reported. Before the email leak, Jamal Ellison's name had nearly vanished from Jefferson Middle's memory. No graduation photo. No mention in the yearbook. No record in school newsletters or honor rolls. It was as if he'd been edited out of the narrative, erased not by mistake, but by design. Isaiah had never known him well. They were 2 years apart, never in the same classes. But he remembered Jamal, tall, bookish, with a quiet intensity. One of the few black kids in the advanced science track. Always wore a green backpack with broken zippers. Liked astronomy, used to doodle constellations in his notebooks. And then, one spring, he was gone. No explanation. No rumors. Just a name that stopped echoing through the halls. Now that name was back, buried in an email instructing staff to shred any formal record. It was the kind of sentence that stuck to your ribs. Isaiah read it over and over, each time feeling the air in his lungs thin. How many others were buried under paperwork never filed? Lorraine wasted no time. She contacted Vanessa, who pulled strings in the parent network and tracked down the last known address tied to the Ellison family. I know someone who might still be in touch, Vanessa said. She made the call that afternoon. Short, careful, respectful. An hour later, she texted Lorraine. Jamal's mother agreed to talk. They met the next evening at a quiet cafe just outside the city. No cameras, no microphones. Isaiah came too. He watched as a woman in her mid-40s stepped through the door with her coat clutched tightly around her. Her face was drawn, not from age, but from surviving a fight no one had believed was real. Her name was Monique Ellison, and she didn't shake hands. She sat down across from Lorraine, gave Isaiah a long look, then spoke like someone who had rehearsed silence for years. I wasn't going to talk, she said. Not again. Not after what they did to him. Lorraine reached across the table, gently. We're not asking for proof, just your truth. Monique hesitated. Then she nodded, and began to speak. Jamal, she said, had always been different. Shy, yes, but brilliant. He didn't raise his voice. He raised his hand. In 8th grade, he'd been invited to a regional math competition. He placed 3rd. He started helping other students with tutoring, even some older than him. That's when the tension began. Mr. Hargrove, she said slowly, didn't like being outshone. At first, it was subtle. Jamal would raise his hand and get ignored, then dismissed, then corrected in front of others for things he hadn't gotten wrong. Monique went to the school. They smiled, nodded, told me everything was fine. Then came the day Jamal came home pale and shaking. They made him solve a problem, she said, voice cracking. On the board, like a pop challenge. Except it wasn't from their lesson. It was something from the high school curriculum. No one else was asked. He solved it, and as he turned to return to his desk, Hargrove had said it. Monique's eyes welled. He told Jamal, didn't know you could think that far ahead. Then he laughed. Everyone laughed. Jamal didn't go back the next day, or the day after. He stopped eating. Stopped talking. I pulled him from school. Monique whispered. But not because he failed. Because he couldn't stop crying. She filed a complaint. Was told it would be handled internally. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the district, stating there was no cause for further action. I called them, she said. They said they had no record of any official complaint. Nothing filed. No investigation. Just a conversation. She paused. And now I know why. Isaiah sat frozen. He didn't know what to say. Because this wasn't just familiar. It was identical. Everything they'd done to him, they'd done to Jamal first. Only no one had listened. Monique reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. She slid it across the table toward Lorraine. I kept everything. Every email. Every letter. Every voicemail. Lorraine opened it. There they were. Printed screenshots of emails from the school. Call logs. Handwritten notes. Jamal had made in his journal. Isaiah leaned over and read one aloud. They don't think I'm real. They think I'm just lucky. But I studied for this. I worked. I learned. His voice cracked. He stopped. Monique wiped her eyes, slowly. I told myself I'd never put him through that again. So we moved. I homeschooled him for a year. He's doing better now. But he doesn't trust schools, or teachers, or adults in authority. She looked at Isaiah, but when he saw your video, he said something I hadn't heard in a long time. She smiled faintly. He said someone finally noticed. Back at home, Isaiah sat with the folder in his lap. He opened the journal pages again, tracing the handwriting with his finger. They had tried to make him feel crazy, paranoid, alone. But Jamal had written it too. Years earlier. It had happened before. Exactly before. The system hadn't broken. It had performed perfectly. The next day, Lorraine got a call. Blocked number. She answered. The voice was low, careful. I'm Jamal's mom, the woman said again. But that's not why I'm calling. Lorraine frowned. You already told us. No, Monique interrupted. I didn't tell you everything. There was a pause. Then Monique said something that made Lorraine sit up straight. Something she hadn't told Vanessa. Not the lawyer. Not the media. Not even her son. Something that could change everything. Jamal's mother reached out to Isaiah's family with something she hadn't told anyone. Lorraine sat in silence, her phone trembling against her ear as Monique Ellison's voice lowered to a whisper. I recorded him, she said. Lorraine blinked. Recorded? Who? Mr. Hargrove, Monique replied. 2 years ago, right after he called Jamal in for a meeting. I was so angry I hit record on my phone before I walked in. Lorraine's chest tightened. You have audio? I do. It's not long, but it's clear. Monique paused, then added, I never used it. I was scared. I thought no one would care. But now, if you're really going forward, I want you to have it. The next day, Monique sent the file. Vanessa, the organizer, played it for a small group. Isaiah, Lorraine, 2 attorneys, and Darius, the journalist. The room stayed silent as the voice played. Mr. Hargrove. Look, Miss Ellison, your son's very bright, but he needs to understand his place. These programs are competitive. They're not for everyone. Monique. His place? What exactly does that mean?
Mr. Hargrove, laughing nervously.
Come on. Don't twist my words. We just want to make sure kids aren't set up for failure. Monique, or is it that you just don't expect kids like him to succeed here? Mr. Hargrove, after a pause. I'm saying there are certain realities, cultural ones. Let's not pretend this is about race. The audio ended. No one moved. Darius leaned forward, slowly. That is everything. Isaiah didn't say a word. He just stared at the wall, hands clenched in his lap. He wasn't surprised, just tired of always being proven right, in the most painful ways. Vanessa stood. This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a case. Within 2 weeks, word spread like thunder through the district. A coalition of 5 families, Lorraine and Isaiah Marshall, Monique and Jamal Ellison, Deneen and Talia Breland, Marcus Jennings's mother, and a former student's guardian, had joined together to file a civil rights lawsuit against Jefferson Middle School, Principal Suzanne Minter and Richard Hargrove. The charge? Systemic racial discrimination, educational sabotage, and the intentional suppression of Black academic success through documented and targeted institutional behavior. The legal team was led by Avery Green, a renowned civil rights attorney known for her landmark case against a school board in St. Louis. She took the case personally, not just because of the evidence, but because, as she said in her first press conference, these students weren't just discouraged, they were erased. And that erasure wasn't passive. It was policy. The press swarmed. National outlets covered it daily. Hashtags resurfaced. Public school administrators statewide went into panic mode, rushing to audit their own disciplinary systems and faculty communications. But while public outrage surged, behind closed doors, the district scrambled to survive. In a private email, leaked days before the first court filing, a school board member wrote, "We must isolate Hargrove to protect the institution. If we lose this case, we open a precedent that could destroy years of administrative discretion." Translation: throw him under the bus to save themselves. But it was too late for damage control. Court filings revealed even more, including new documentation of grade tampering, suspicious teacher reassignment records, and internal emails mocking parent complaints as PR headaches. Each discovery deepened the narrative. The math problem had become the matchstick, but the fire had been waiting for years. Isaiah watched it all unfold with a mix of anxiety and distance. He was still a kid, still going to school, still trying to finish homework and eat dinner. But now, he was also deposition material, subpoenaed as a plaintiff, prepping for testimony with Avery Green's legal team. The pressure wasn't media anymore. It was legal. Vanessa coached him through the process. "You're not alone," she said one afternoon. "But you are essential." His voice mattered now more than ever. Still, he couldn't shake the fear. Not just of the courtroom, but of what came after. What came if they won. Or worse, if they didn't. Then, 2 weeks before the first scheduled court hearing, something unexpected happened.
Mr. Hargrove resigned.
Without a hearing. Without facing direct questioning. Without even waiting to see the full weight of the case. He walked away. The district announced it with a single-sentence memo. "Mr. Richard Hargrove has voluntarily resigned his position, effective immediately. We thank him for his years of service." No apology. No accountability. Just a door closing with a shrug. The city lit up with debate. Protesters called it cowardice. Parents called it calculated. But what happened next left them stunned. The day after Hargrove's resignation, a document surfaced on a local news blog. It was a written personal statement from Hargrove himself, emailed to select media outlets under the subject, "My Side of the Story." In it, he framed his departure as a necessary step to preserve the integrity of education amid a media circus. He claimed that he had been misunderstood, mischaracterized, and vilified by a cancel culture that cares more about narratives than facts. He even quoted lines from his classroom philosophy, writing, "I've always believed in high expectations. I've pushed students to achieve what others said they couldn't. That challenge is now being twisted into discrimination." And then came the most chilling part. "I've taught hundreds of students across races, backgrounds, and abilities. But the current cultural climate doesn't reward truth. It punishes anyone who expects excellence. I never punished anyone for being black. I challenged them to be great. And they resented me for it." He ended with a quote from his favorite author, underlined, "No good deed goes unpunished." Isaiah read the statement on his phone that night, his jaw clenched. Because for all the damage Hargrove had done, this felt like the deepest cut, the rewriting of his own legacy, as a misunderstood hero. The following day, Isaiah met with Avery Green to prep for the next round of depositions. She slid Hargrove's statement across the table without saying a word. Isaiah picked it up. "Read it again." When he finished, he looked at her. "He still doesn't get it," he said, a very leaned back. "He does. He just doesn't care. This isn't about truth. It's about rewriting the ending." She paused, "And we're not going to let him." But as they walked out of the office, another message arrived on Avery's phone. She stopped cold. "Something happened?" Isaiah asked. She nodded slowly, scrolling. "They've hired a private defense team," she said. "Not just for Hargrove, for the district." He frowned. "So, they're going to fight this tooth and nail. And that statement? That wasn't just damage control." She turned the screen to show him a leaked email. It was from one of the district's internal communications officers. "We need to prepare for full litigation. We cannot let the narrative stand that we targeted black excellence. We need counter-testimonies. Teachers willing to speak. This cannot become precedent." The teacher resigned before the court date, but not before releasing his own statement. The written statement was only the beginning. 4 days after stepping down, Richard Hargrove released a video on his personal website, a carefully framed, softly lit monologue, filmed in what looked like a home office. A globe sat behind him. A bookshelf filled with trophies and literature titles surrounded his shoulder like a halo. The video opened with a piano instrumental and a title screen. "A Teacher's Truth, the Story Behind the Story." He looked directly into the camera, wearing a blue button-down and a look of wounded composure. "I've stayed quiet," he began, "because I believed the system I served would protect fairness. I believed that in time, the truth would rise on its own." He paused. "But silence has become dangerous, and now I need to speak." What followed was a 12-minute attempt to rewrite history, not with rage but with soft-spoken condescension. He recounted decades of mentoring students across all races, talked about the joy of challenging young minds, and claimed he'd been vilified by a child manipulated by adult agendas. Then came the moment that turned a smoldering fire into a wildfire. "I never sought to harm Isaiah Marshall," he said. "But I do believe Isaiah, perhaps unintentionally, allowed himself to be used. This wasn't about racism. This was about fame. About a moment that could have passed quietly but was inflated for media attention. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, voice lower. And if I'm guilty of anything, it's expecting too much from a young man who may not have been ready for the spotlight. He ended the video with a final message. I will not apologize for setting high standards. I only regret that excellence has become something to fear. The screen faded to black. Below the video, the title read, Truth Matters Too. The internet detonated. The video was shared over 4 million times in 24 hours. Conservative blogs hailed it as brave. Education forums debated it endlessly. Some called it a masterclass in professional gaslighting. But most, especially within Isaiah's community, saw it for what it was, a bitter man refusing to accept responsibility. Hashtags began flooding Twitter and Instagram. Victim blamed, silencing the silenced. Marshall deserved better. Parents reposted screenshots of Hargrove's old emails next to his mentor claims. Former students recorded short clips, each sharing a memory of how he'd made them feel small, invisible, or inferior. Some cried. Some stared blankly into their cameras. One simply held up a sign. Still healing. Vanessa, the organizer, recorded a direct response. We aren't witnessing a man defending his truth. We're witnessing a man trying to survive accountability. For Isaiah, the video wasn't just insulting, it was personal. He watched it on his laptop, headphones on. Alone in his room, Lorraine stood outside the door, hand on the knob, debating whether to interrupt. When she finally walked in, Isaiah hadn't moved. He was just staring at the frozen image of Hargrove mid-sentence. I didn't think he'd do that, Isaiah whispered. Lorraine sat beside him. Oh, baby, she said softly. They always do. He turned toward her, eyes burning. I didn't want any of this. I didn't ask to be a symbol. I just answered a question. I solved a problem. I know, she said. He shook his head, and now he's making it seem like I'm the problem. She reached for his hand. Because if he admits what he did, he has to admit it wasn't just you. It was every child like you he dismissed. Everyone he pushed down while smiling through it. Isaiah's voice cracked. What if people believe him? Lorraine squeezed his hand. Then we show them the truth. The next day, Isaiah returned to school, amid heavy stares. He passed posters from the student union taped across lockers. You are not what they say. We stand with Isaiah. Some students nodded at him. Others avoided eye contact. A few whispered. At lunch he sat alone again. Not because he had to, but because he couldn't stomach another person asking if he was okay. What no one understood was that being turned into a headline didn't make you stronger. It made you fragile in places no one could see. That night, Isaiah avoided the news. He closed his laptop, shut off his phone, but the silence didn't help. Because deep down, one question kept gnawing at him. Why wasn't my father here for any of this? His father had left when Isaiah was 10. Not entirely, just enough to leave a void too familiar to name. He would call sometimes, text on birthdays, promise a visit and not show. No abuse, no drama, just distance that became routine. His name was Marcus, a soft-spoken man who'd once taught Isaiah chess, told him to stand tall, then disappeared into the background like a shadow. Now, in the midst of Isaiah's public firestorm, Marcus hadn't called once. Not when the video went viral, not when the school threatened suspension, not even after the lawsuit made national headlines. To Isaiah, it felt like the final proof that even your own could abandon you when you were too loud. But Lorraine had kept one secret. She'd called Marcus 2 weeks ago, left a message, told him what was happening, begged him, just once, to show up. He never returned the call. Until now. Isaiah was in the kitchen the morning after Hargrove's video went live. He was pouring cereal, shoulders tense. There was a knock at the door. Lorraine opened it and froze. Isaiah looked up and dropped the spoon in his hand. There on the front step stood Marcus Marshall. Older now, hair grayer, shoulders lower, but the same eyes. He held nothing. No bag, no gifts, just himself. Isaiah stared. Marcus cleared his throat. Hey kid. Lorraine stepped aside, unsure what to say. Isaiah just blinked. What are you doing here? Marcus stepped in slowly. I saw the video. Isaiah's mouth twisted. Took you long enough. Marcus nodded. You're right. I wasn't there. A pause. But I'm here now. Isaiah's jaw clenched. Why? Marcus took a breath. Because he said you were chasing fame. And I know that's a lie. And I won't sit back while someone tries to turn my son into a villain for telling the truth. Isaiah's chest rose and fell. He didn't answer. Marcus walked forward, slow and uncertain, and placed a folded piece of paper on the counter. I've been writing a statement, he said, about you, about what I saw in you when you were 4 years old, and solved a puzzle your uncle couldn't finish. About how even when I disappeared, you kept rising. I want people to hear it. Isaiah's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. He read the first line, and finally he cried. For the first time, Isaiah's father, who'd been silent for years, stood up to speak. The courthouse steps were lined with camera crews, reporters, protesters, and parents clutching their children's hands. Signs waved in the crisp October wind, like battle flags. We believe Isaiah. Erase racism, not records. Excellence shouldn't need permission. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Packed pews, tight shoulders, whispered prayers. At the front, Isaiah Marshall sat beside his attorney, Avery Green. Eyes forward, hands locked together. His suit was slightly too big, the tie too tight. But his spine was straight. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was testimony in motion. The case Marshall v. Jefferson Middle School, et al., had become one of the most closely watched civil rights trials of the year. Civil liberties groups called it the education system's mirror. District officials called it an overreach, but everyone watching knew it was about more than one classroom. It was about every time a student was told to tone it down. Every time a parent's concern was waved off as emotional. Every time a black child solved a problem and someone called it luck. The day's testimonies began with familiar faces. Jamal Ellison, Talia Breland, Marcus Jennings. Each took the stand with trembling hands and steady voices. They told the courtroom how it felt to be discouraged while doing everything right. How it felt to be called aggressive for asking questions. How it felt to be moved to a lower class with no explanation, while their white peers struggled upward. Then came Lorraine Marshall. She spoke not just as Isaiah's mother, but as the voice of every black parent who had fought for their child in quiet meetings where concern always meant contain. They made my son feel like his intelligence was a threat, she said. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded. Gasps echoed when she pulled out Isaiah's original testing forms from 5th grade, buried in a box, never filed properly. It proved Isaiah had scored in the top percentile for advanced math years, before Hargrove ever called on him. They saw his potential, she said. They just decided it didn't fit their picture. Finally, the judge called Isaiah to the stand. The room stilled. He walked up, palms sweating, throat dry. The bailiff swore him in. Very Green stood. Isaiah, do you remember the day Mr. Hargrove asked you to solve that problem on the board? He nodded. Yes. Was it a normal assignment? No. Had that material been covered in class? No. What happened after you solved it? He paused. He laughed. The class laughed too, but it wasn't because it was funny. It was because no one expected me to get it right. Why do you think that is? Isaiah looked up. Because I'm black, and because I don't talk much. They assumed that meant I wasn't smart. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Avery continued. Isaiah, when Mr. Hargrove said, "You people don't usually try this hard," how did that make you feel? Isaiah's lips parted slowly. It made me feel like I didn't belong, like my success wasn't supposed to happen. His voice cracked. And if it did, it was a mistake. He stared down at his hands. I stopped raising my hand after that. Not because I didn't know the answers, but because I knew they'd look at me different. Like I was showing off. Or like I didn't know my place. Avery let the silence hang. Then she asked, "Did anyone at the school support you after the video went viral?" He shook his head. They tried to silence me. They told me not to speak to media. They said I'd get suspended if I made the school look bad. Did anyone apologize? No. Not once. Cross-examination came next. The district's attorney was calm, rehearsed. A middle-aged man with tortoiseshell glasses and a fatherly tone that grated against the edges of truth. "Isaiah," he said, "you're a very bright young man. No one's disputing that." Isaiah said nothing. The lawyer smiled. "Would you agree that sometimes people say things they don't mean? In stressful environments?" Isaiah shrugged. "Sure, but that doesn't make it less real." The attorney chuckled softly. "Fair enough. But you understand Mr. Hargrove never used a slur, right? He didn't call you a name." Isaiah's brow furrowed. "He didn't need to."
Oh?
He just had to remind me I wasn't supposed to be that smart. That's what you people meant. That I was an exception. A surprise. A mistake. The lawyer blinked. Isaiah leaned forward. And the thing is, he said that kind of thing before. To other kids. That's why we're here. Not because of one comment, but because of all the ones that never made it to court. The gallery sat in stunned silence. Even the judge seemed moved. The testimony ended. Isaiah stepped down from the stand, eyes glassy, steps deliberate. His father, Marcus, stood from the gallery as Isaiah passed. He didn't say anything. He just placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The jury was excused for deliberation. The judge prepared to dismiss for the day. Then it happened. The foreperson of the jury, an older black woman with silver braids and steady hands, raised her arm. "Your Honor," she said, "the jury requests something before deliberation." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Speak." The woman cleared her throat. "We'd like access to a video." The courtroom stiffened. "What video?" the judge asked. The foreperson handed the bailiff a slip of paper. He brought it forward. The judge read it silently, lips pressed tight. Then he spoke. "This jury is requesting access to a classroom recording not submitted into evidence dated 3 months before the incident in question. From Jefferson Middle Surveillance System Archives." He looked up. "Defense counsel, do you know of this footage?" The district's attorney looked visibly shaken. "We were not made aware of such a file, Your Honor." A very green stood. "We weren't either, but we strongly support the jury's right to review all relevant material." The judge glanced between them. "If this footage exists," he said slowly, "and it was withheld." He didn't finish the sentence. The courtroom buzzed with confusion. The judge banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned until the surveillance footage is recovered." Isaiah looked at Avery. She leaned in, whispering, "That footage wasn't in discovery. That means someone on the inside gave them something no one else saw." Isaiah's pulse pounded, because if that tape was what he thought it might be, the truth was about to go deeper than anyone expected. The jury passed a note to the judge requesting access to a video not yet submitted as evidence. No one knew how the jury got the video. Not the attorneys, not the court, not even the district. But by the time the footage was queued up in the courtroom's evidence monitor, the next morning, the judge's expression made it clear what they were about to see was not standard. The bailiff dimmed the lights. The screen flickered, grainy and gray, revealing a familiar scene. Room 217. Mr. Hargrove's classroom. The timestamp read, August 12, 8:13 a.m., nearly 3 months before the viral incident. The room was already full. Students shuffled into their seats. The camera, perched high in a back corner, offered a full view of the whiteboard, the teacher's desk, and most of the class. Mr. Hargrove entered the frame, setting his coffee down, sleeves rolled, energy brisk. Then came the moment. He turned toward a tall black student near the back. Not Isaiah, a different boy. Thin, nervously tapping his pencil. The courtroom went silent as Hargrove said, clearly and audibly, "Hey Marcus, want to show us how deep your street smarts go? Try this one." He gestured to the board where a math problem had already been written, far above grade level. Laughter. Not a lot, but enough. The student, Marcus Jennings, stood up slowly, visibly uneasy. He walked to the board and fumbled with the marker. Hargrove leaned against his desk, arms crossed. The class whispered. The problem wasn't solved correctly. Hargrove smirked and said, "Well, that's one approach. Not the right one, but hey, progress is progress." More laughter. Then he added, "Maybe leave the algebra to the honor roll, and you stick to pickup games. Sound fair?" The laughter died awkwardly. The video showed Marcus pausing, shoulders tightening, then turning back to his desk without a word. What came next sent a chill through the courtroom. As the student sat down, Hargrove leaned over to another teacher, a white woman in a cardigan, seated at the front grading papers. He whispered, but the mic caught it. "I give it 2 months before he transfers himself out." She didn't respond, but she smiled. The screen froze. Gasps filled the room. Isaiah's breath caught in his throat, because this was the moment they'd all felt, but never captured. The laughter, the dismissal, the silent humiliation, and the casual way it was done. Like it was routine, like it had happened before. Because it had. Judge Daniels turned to the jury. "Have you seen enough?" The foreperson nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked to both counsels, his voice low. "Control." This footage, confirmed as authentic by the district's own surveillance logs, demonstrates not only a pattern of discriminatory behavior, but also a culture of complicity among faculty. He paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle. I find the omission of this footage from the discovery process deeply troubling. The district's attorney shifted, visibly sweating. I assure the court, he stammered, we were unaware of this video's existence. It may have been archived under outdated protocols. The judge raised a hand. Enough. He turned to his clerk. Issue a formal request to the school board. Then, with firm finality, he spoke words that no one expected. This court is ordering immediate disciplinary action, not just for Mr. Hargrove. He glanced over his glasses at the seated figures from the district office, present in court for show but silent throughout. But for every administrator who oversaw these classrooms and ignored years of complaints. Every one of them. The courtroom erupted. Shouts. Applause. Tears. The gavel struck. Order. But nothing could quiet the storm now. Isaiah sat frozen, his chest rising with slow, sharp breaths. Lorraine gripped his arm. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. This wasn't just accountability for one man. This was the system cracking under truth. It could no longer contain. After the hearing, outside the courthouse, a new crowd had gathered. Not just students or parents, educators, black teachers, retired principals, advocates for reform. They held signs too, but theirs read, "We tried to warn you." Truth was always in the room. Support black students and black teachers. A black math teacher named Mr. Darnell stepped to the mic in a spontaneous press moment. I taught in this district for 18 years, he said, and I left not because of kids, but because of adults who didn't believe in those kids. He turned to the cameras. You want to fix education? Start by believing that black brilliance isn't rare. It's ignored. That night, back at home, Isaiah sat in the quiet of his room, watching the replay of the judge's ruling on the evening news. His father, Marcus, walked in, leaned against the doorframe. You did something big today, he said. Isaiah turned. I didn't do it alone. Marcus nodded. Still, he said, you stood there, in that courtroom, and they heard you. Isaiah looked back at the screen. For the first time, he saw himself not as the boy who was humiliated in a classroom, but as the one who refused to stay small. But the story wasn't over. Later that evening, Avery Green received an encrypted message from a tech reporter. It contained a tip, a warning, and something else. Evidence that one of the administrators under investigation had tried to delete dozens of internal files just hours before the court order. Among those files, a document labeled Settlement Considerations, Project Quiet Exit. Avery's blood ran cold. She forwarded the file to the judge. Because this wasn't just about what they saw on tape. It was about everything they still didn't know. The judge ordered immediate disciplinary action, but not just for the teacher. The courtroom ruling made headlines across the country, but what followed made history. Judge Daniel's unprecedented decision to hold multiple district leaders accountable triggered a domino effect. State education officials launched emergency audits in 6 counties. School boards scrambled to review decades of buried complaints, flagged lesson plans, and faculty training programs. It was no longer just about Jefferson Middle. It was about the quiet rot that had lived in too many classrooms, for too many years, behind too many polite smiles. New legislation was drafted under pressure from parents and advocates. A bill titled the Marshall Standards passed into law, requiring mandatory cultural bias training for all K-12 educators, independent review panels for student discipline disputes, and the right for parents to request classroom footage if a discrimination claim arose. Isaiah's name was now on the policy documents, but he didn't celebrate. Because while the system was beginning to shift, he knew the deeper work had to happen somewhere else, somewhere quieter, less public, but more personal. He declined every scholarship that came in. There were many offered from Ivy League schools, STEM academies, even HBCUs. Some were real. Some were damage control. But Isaiah said no to all of them. What he wanted wasn't in a lecture hall or a lab. It was in classrooms like Room 217, where quiet black boys sat in the second row, eyes down, hands raised, hearts shrinking with each dismissal. That's where the battle began. So that's where he chose to return. 1 year later, Isaiah launched a city-funded mentorship program called Board Breakers. The idea was simple. Bring in middle school boys, quiet ones, underestimated ones, the ones already hearing the whispers of who they could or couldn't be, and show them the truth. Not just math. Not just confidence, but identity, brilliance, belonging. He started with 10 students, then 20. By spring, the waiting list stretched out the door. He didn't wear a tie. He didn't talk down. He just pulled up a chair, opened a notebook, and asked, "What do they say you're not good at?" Then he helped them destroy that lie. On the anniversary of the day he'd stood at the whiteboard, in Mr. Hargrove's class, the city held a recognition ceremony in his honor. Mayors came. Activists spoke. Lorraine stood behind the podium and told a crowd of 400 how her son used to whisper answers to himself because he didn't think anyone wanted to hear them. "Now," she said, tears in her eyes, "he teaches boys to speak even when the world says be quiet." The room rose to its feet. But Isaiah didn't stay long after. Because the next day, he had a session. And that's where he wanted to be. It was a cloudy Thursday afternoon when Isaiah walked into the old community rec center, his backpack slung low, a folder tucked under one arm. He stepped into the familiar room, the same one where he'd once read math books too advanced for his grade, the one Mr. Okonkwo used to sneak into his hands after hours. The desks were mismatched. The carpet was worn. But the energy? Electric. 10 boys sat in a circle, pencils tapping, sneakers bouncing, eyes alert. "Welcome back, Coach Zay," one of them called out. He smiled. "All right," Isaiah said. "Today's challenge isn't about numbers. It's about voices." The boys leaned in. Isaiah walked to the whiteboard, uncapped the marker, and wrote 3 words. "You belong here." He circled the phrase twice, then turned. "Anybody want to tell me why that sentence matters more than any equation?" One hand shot up. Then another. They were ready. He was just about to start the session when the door creaked open behind him. He turned and froze. In the doorway stood a young man, older than the boys, maybe 19. A little taller, shoulders squared, a backpack hanging loose from one arm. Isaiah's heart skipped. The face was older, sharper, more tired, but the eyes were the same. "Jamal?" he said. The room went silent. The young man nodded. "Hey," Jamal said, voice steady. "I heard there was a seat open." Isaiah stepped forward, stunned. "I thought—" "You helped me," Jamal interrupted. "You didn't even know it. But you did." He glanced at the boys. "And I want to do the same." Isaiah looked at the circle of kids, then back at the boy who once disappeared. He walked forward, reached out, and handed Jamal the marker. Because sometimes the best way to finish a problem is to give someone else the power to solve it. As Isaiah walked into his first mentoring session, a familiar face was waiting in the classroom. They didn't just question his intelligence. They questioned his place. And still, he wrote. If this story reminded you of someone who was silenced for being too smart, too black, or too brave,
Don't let it stop here.
type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.